You are checking your valves and you find out that your exhaust valve is now 0.009 inches, right? And the spec on this is 0.011 plus or minus 0.001. So between 0.010 and 0.012 inches, right? So 0.009 is out of spec. So we are going to open that one up. I'll show you how to do the math a little later. For right now, we're not super worried about it. Let's go through how to pull everything apart, figure out which shim you need to put back in, and then we'll do that, okay? So for right now, all you need to know is that it's out of spec, and you need to get that shim out in order to measure its thickness to figure out what shim you need to put in to bring your valves back into spec, okay? You've already got most of the steps done just by removing everything, right? Your plug's out, the valve cover's off, you're at top dead center. When you're checking your clearances, you're already most of the way there. But just for your own peace of mind, before you go pulling your cam out, right, let's just double check. Let's go down. Your crankshaft is lined up. Your decompression weight is sitting forward. And the most important one are the tick marks on your camshaft sprocket line up with the mating surfaces. Right? Can you see back here the flat where the top and the bottom come together? These marks need to go level and even with it. And once you're sure of those three things, you are ready to pull it apart. So the first thing we're going to do is get rid of that leaf. So this is your cam chain tensioner. It pushes tension on your cam chain so there's no slop in it. And if you have a tensioner stopper, right, you take this bolt out and the stopper goes in. It's all in your manual. If you don't have one, you're just going to pull the whole thing out. You're going to loosen up these two bolts, one after the other, like a couple turns here, a couple turns here, and the whole thing will slide out. Okay? There will be a little bit of oil that drips out of this. It's all good. All right, that comes out, and then there is a gasket. Don't lose that. Little black gasket there. Sometimes it'll stick to here. Okay. Now that that's out, you can see that the cam chain is no longer under tension. Okay. Next, we're going to take the camshaft holder off, which is this plate right here. It has these 4 bolts. Hold it in, and underneath, in the bearing journals, there are little metal retainers that keep the bearings in place so they don't slide out. The problem is that if this side falls out, it goes straight down into the crankcase. So get yourself a rag or something and stuff it in here. All right, I'm not saying it'll catch it, but it'll slow it down. Okay, next we're going to loosen these guys up in a crisscross pattern. These are only on with, I think, 11 foot-pounds of force, so they're not on very hard. Now you might be tempted to try to keep the bolts in as you take everything out. Don't bother with that. You're going to be a little more concerned about keeping those retainers from flying around on you. I think they call them set rings in the manual. But you'll see them. They're just, it's like half a piston ring and they just sit in a little groove, but there's nothing that actually holds them in. So they will fall out. Just don't let them fall down into your crankcase. Okay, there's the bolts out. You see there are 2 short ones 2 long ones, shorter in the back, longer in the front. That'll make sense when everything goes back in. All right, so this is going to come out. I'm going to loosen it up gently. Oh, there we go. And the first thing I'm going to do is move it away from the crankcase hole there. And here they are. Oh, they didn't move. That's awesome. So here's one, just so you see what they look like. I'm actually kind of in a dangerous spot, but there they are, and they just sit in this little groove. The holder's off. Here's your cam. Here are the 2 bearings. Here are your rocker arms for your exhaust, rockers for your intake. To get this off, I'm going to just lift up just a little bit on the sprocket side and push that bearing over. And once I let it tilt, the chain actually comes off pretty easily. And then I'm going to put a zip tie on the chain to hold it up so that doesn't fall down in the crankcase as well. If it does, right, if you have a magnet on a stick, you can just fish it back out. But in order to not have to fish it out, I can actually zip tie this probably to that wire right here, just so it doesn't fall down. There we go. Now it's zip tied, so reaching back inside, we're going to pull the cam, we're going to get the chain off the rest of the way and pull the cam out. So here's your cam, here's your little decompressor. All right, you see the ball bearing moves. So we're going to make sure everything moves. Basically what that does is when you're spinning at low speed, it forces your exhaust port open, so it doesn't have any compression. So it makes spinning the motor when you hit the starter button really easy. And once it gets up to speed, right, see the little ball bearing? Once it gets up to speed, this weight throws itself out, and that drops in, and then you have full valve action. That's all it is. It's just a way to decompress the engine while it's starting up, so that you don't need a massive starter motor to spin the motor, or if you're kicking it too. Okay, so there's your cam. Okay, let me move this rag. I'm going to leave it there because when you put everything back in, I'm going to want to put that back in. So your shims are on the tops of the valves. There's one there. Can you see it? There's shims on the tops of each of the valves. To get that one out, I'm just going to put the magnet over there by it and pull it out. Right, and there's your shim. And then while we're looking at it, right, the other one's under here, and then your intake sides are under here. Right, there's the other one. Now you see there's lots of oil sitting on these. When you go to put everything back, in case I forget to mention it, keep everything wet. They recommend that you put molybdenum grease, or at least 3% molybdenum grease, on all the wear parts, where on the cam lobes, on the rockers, and I would add some to the top of the shims as well. So here's the shim we pulled out, and we don't know what size that is until we get it on a micrometer, and then I'll tell you exactly what size that is. And then we're going to do the math, right? The new shim thickness, recorded valve clearance, specified valve clearance, old shim thickness. So A, the new shim thickness, is what we're trying to solve for. Let's do some math. I know, John, you said never do the math. Okay, I'm sorry. You have to do some math. We're going to figure out what thickness this is, and then we're going to figure out what size shim we need to add in order to get our valve clearance back in tolerance. So this is a hot cam shim kit. There's a couple different makers of shim kits. The only important thing you need to know is make sure that the sizing is right for your bike. So this is a hot cam, and this is shim kit number, whatever that number is. So this has the right size shims that should be in the bike, and it has enough different sizes that we should be able to get our tolerances back to where they need to be. Order it from wherever, from whoever. Go to your dealership and spend some money with those guys. But just make sure you're getting one that's for a Honda 450. Okay? And the right year too. Here's our shim, and here's the formula in the book. Our new shim thickness is going to equal the recorded valve clearance minus the specified valve clearance plus the old shim thickness. So if we do the math, I know, get off my back. Right, so A is equal to the recorded valve clearance, which is 0.229 millimeters. I suggest, since all your shims are in millimeters, you just convert everything to millimeters, right? Minus the specified valve clearance, which, as you recall, if you look over here, is 0.28 millimeters, 0.280 plus, and then here's the old shim thickness. Okay, so there's two ways to measure your shim thickness. The smart way is to go out and spend $100 on a micrometer, go find a video on how to read it. That's the hard part. I wonder if I can do this. See if I can. Is that gonna work? No, maybe not. All right, well, here, it's 1, 2, 3. So this is 0.757, and is that a 5? Call that 5. So 5280. That's what it is in thousandths of an inch, and I'm not that smart. I'm just going to go on the website and type in the number 82, what did I say, 0.5? Metric of 2.095. We'll call that 2.10 or 2.1, right? 2.1. So that is our old shim. That's this guy right here. If you're going to do this all in metric, then go ahead and buy your micrometer in metric. This is in thousandths, you know, because I'm American. I can't do anything easy. So 2.10. Okay, so 2.29, and then, because I've got my phone out already, 0.229 minus 0.28 equals negative 0.051 plus, you see where I'm going with this? Plus 2.10, again these are all in millimeters, plus 2.10, that's our old shim thickness, equals 2.049. Let's call that 2.05. Here's our old shim. We're going to reach in here, going to grab one of these, and these are all marked. I will be blown away if you guys can read what that says. But on it, it tells you the thickness in millimeters. So that's the size shim I need in order to get this back in spec-ish. I've got a feeling it's actually going to go over the 2.80, but not by much. Not enough to throw it out of spec the other way. Okay? I think it's going to be in spec with the plus side of things. So I told you there's two ways to figure out your shim thickness. That's the smart, that's the scientific, that's the real way to do it. I just told you we already measured this, so we know what the thickness is, but let's pretend we didn't. Real quick, your phone works great. What you want is a ridiculously flat surface. I don't know if you know this about your fingers, but they can feel a thousandth of an inch difference. So you're going to lay those two side by side, and you're going to just swipe one way and then swipe the other way. It is feeling for that edge, right? And you're just going to keep doing that until you find one that's as perfectly flat, let's get rid of this, as possible. Okay, if you use your phone, maybe turn it off so it's not doing all kinds of weird stuff. There we go. Without looking, the one on, I know you can't see that I'm not looking. I promise I'm not looking. The one on the left is just a wee bit thicker. And yeah, there we go. So you can feel the difference. Okay? So you're just going to have to go through all your shims and try to figure out what the height is, or the thickness rather. Once you do that, do the math, and then go from there. And then you're going to install it just like we're about to install it now, and you're going to double check it anyway. So even if you're wrong, you'll at least know how far wrong you are. Let's go put our new shim in and see what happens. Oh, and as I'm packing all this stuff up and cleaning up, let me let you know that, so this is a pair of calipers. It does the same thing as a micrometer, but it is not nearly accurate enough. So when you go into the hardware store and you see one of these for 10 bucks, no, 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 you're gonna have to spend 100 bucks or thereabouts, okay? That's all. We're going to carefully, without dropping it into the crankcase, we're going to put it back on top of the valve. There it goes. I'm going to get some oil from somewhere over here. I'm going to schmutz the top of that with some oil. My favorite, Lucas Red and Tacky Grease. So we're going to get some of this. All right, and that's going to go there. We'll put some on the back side of the roller. Throw some everywhere. Can't hurt. You never have too much grease. But you definitely don't want to have all these parts dry when you fit them all back together. We got everything in there all greased up. We've got our cam back. We're going to set this in. We're going to set it so that the weight is front, and so that these marks, right, line up with the top of the casing there. We'll get it in kind of roughly. Now this bearing's pushed out so that that can drop low. Get rid of my zip tie. I'm going to re-hook the chain onto the cam. While I aim those marks up. So the tick mark's way down here and up here, so it has to go this way. So we're going to pull that bearing front, dip the cam, and roll everything. Roll everything this way. Try the chain back on. Slide it in, and you can see, oh, I'm closer, right? So do it again. Dip, roll it one link. There we go. Just rolling it one cog at a time until it's perfect there. Now it's perfect. I don't know if I should stress this even more than I already have, but take your time and make sure that those marks are exact. All right, it's probably worth showing you guys again how these little retainers just sit in this groove. There's nothing holding them in there, right? They could just fall right out. So We'll put a little oil in the groove. That should help. You can always put some grease in the groove too. That still doesn't guarantee that they're going to stay in. And then we're going to go ahead and put this on. Now remember, it's pretty easy. It has an arrow that points front. Arrow points front. So this is ready to go in. We got the clips in and they're seated. They just stick out just a little tiny bit. And then the back side has these sleeves that go down in these oversized holes. All right, so hopefully this grease in there will hold everything from falling out. That seems to be the trickiest part of this whole damn thing. So we're going to line that hole up, right, with the groove in the bearing. So that one should be there. That one should be about there-ish. And lay it over. And don't force anything. Just let it go on if it's going to. Oop. Okay, it looks like it's on. The camshaft has a little wiggle to it, but you shouldn't be able to move it very far. Right? Make sure that your decompressor weight is free, and no matter how far you move the cam in its travel, it doesn't bind up. Okay? This bearing should be about flush. This bearing the same thing on the other side. When the cam holder is down and everything's right, these two mating surfaces go down and touch easily. Right? Can you see the front? They're touching, and then double check around the back side. It's much, much easier to see. They're touching, they're flush. I didn't have to force anything. Right, there's no gap. There we go. Okay, once we're super happy with that, all right, now you've got those 4 bolts. 2 are short and have pins. Those go in the back. 2 are longer and don't have pins. Those go in the front. These guys, again, they get torqued down to 11 foot-pounds, and we're going to do the star pattern. Okay, all that's in. I can take my rag out. Those are torqued down. What we're going to do is double check our valve that was out of spec, and oh, there we go. It's at 1200. It's at 01.2, so it's on the high side of its clearance, which is okay by me. That just means I have longer before I have to check it again. The last thing we're going to do is put our cam chain tensioner back in. Here's this little center bolt, and I don't know if you can see in there, but there's a slot down in there. And the automatic thing just goes in and turns that slot and then locks. If you don't have that, that's fine. What you're going to do is get yourself a skinny screwdriver. And the way this works is there's a screw in there that when you turn this, can you see it's closing up? It's coming back. There's a spring that that pushes it out. So if you just push this in, it's going to be at full extension, and it's going to push your chain guide in, your cam chain guide in. When you go to put this back in, get your screwdriver, wind it all the way in, okay? Hand tighten your little mounting bolts here. Probably it's okay if I just did one, just to keep it from moving.
Okay, once that's all the way in, and then just, you can't see it spinning, but it's spinning back out, and then just let it go and you're done. And then just tighten this up, put your little center bolt back in, and it'll automatically retension your cam chain. Okay?
Button it up like you normally would. And it's just that easy. The hardest part is getting the cam bearings and the little half retainer rings to all line up. And if they're not lined up, it'll be obvious. The cam will have a lot of slop in it. The bearings will be either way far in or way far out. And the two mating surfaces between the holder and the actual engine, they won't come together easily, right? You should be able to hand tighten those down and it should just close right up. You shouldn't have to force anything. Anyways, okay, clear as mud? All right. Thank you guys. Thank you guys as always for watching. And if you have any tips or tricks on how to make that easier or less intimidating, that would be awesome. I'd appreciate it. And so would everybody else. Okay. All right. I'm going to button everything up and see if it starts.